so the doctor came in, he delivered the bad news, and next thing you know, I'm standing in the room with my grandfather who lay there dead, and I'm silently saying goodbye for the very last time. And as we walked out of the hospital, I got into the parking lot, and it occurred to me that my grandmother was in no condition to drive, and come to think of it, probably in no condition to live on her own. She was forgetting all kinds of things, familiar people's names, her address, how to make familiar or favorite recipes. Her self-care was starting to be lacking, and her house was getting messy and disorganized. And it wasn't long after my grandfather passed that we realized there was no way that she could take care of herself. And since I was the only family member in the area, we decided that she would come and live with us. So I was 30 years old, married, my son was 5, my daughter was a year old, and she had a medical condition. I was working full-time in a stressful environment that was unionizing, finishing my master's degree, and grieving the loss of my grandfather when this new caregiving responsibility came onto my plate. So my grandmother had Alzheimer's disease, and she came and lived with us. And now you might be thinking, well, that's not that bad in the grand scheme of things. It's not like I was living in a war zone. But if you could have stepped into my body at that point in time, it was like Hurricane Katrina in there. And I was very stressed. It was the straw that broke the camel's back. And as a therapist, you'd think I'd know what to do. But my initial response when I started to realize I was having a burnout was to eat more spinach, do yoga, go to the gym more often, make an appointment for hair, nails, massage, because that was my concept of self-care at the time, just to do more things to pamper myself, do more healthy things. But I quickly realized that these were just more obligations, more appointments, more things to do. And I don't have anything against these methods of self-care. But what I can say is that if you're burning out, these will barely scratch the surface, and they will not help you realize or understand why you're taking on too much, why you're saying yes when you should be saying no, and why you're not putting your own oxygen mask on before helping someone else with theirs. And so I got more and more exhausted, more and more stressed, and more burnt out. And you know what I found through all of this? Well, first I found a good therapist, which I think everyone should have. And after reading more self-help books than any one person should be legally allowed to, going to Peru to work with plant medicines like ayahuasca and San Pedro, hiking the Grand Canyon in search of inner peace, I found that most of my stress was not out there in the world. It was right here between my own 2 ears. And what I hope to convince you of tonight is that human beings have a fundamental misconception about what is causing their stress. Here's the thing. We are being bombarded every second by millions of bits of information. Our brain is taking in millions of bits of information every second. And if we paid attention to it all, we wouldn't even be able to function. We'd go crazy. And so luckily, we've got filters that let us know what can be ignored, which is most of it, and what we need to pay attention to. And through these filters, we interpret everything that's out there, and that's what determines what happens in here. Where do we get these filters? Well, some of them are biologically programmed. Some of them are passed down through our conditioning. Some are based in our past experiences. And so I want to share a little story with you about where this became crystal clear to me. Stick with me, I'm getting back to burnout. But this was the first time I hiked the Grand Canyon. So I'm 22 kilometers in. I get to the first campsite, and I'm ahead of the group. So I get there, and there's this big boulder on the campsite, and I go and I put my backpack on the boulder, and I get up on that boulder, and I'm just, I'm looking at the view of the canyon from below the rim, and it's just spectacular. It's amazing. And I'm having this sense of inner peace that I've never experienced before. And I just sat there in absolute awe for, I don't even know how many minutes, but at least, 5 or 10 minutes. And then I got hungry. So I dug into my backpack, grabbed a granola bar, and I went for a little walk. And so I got to the edge of the campsite, and I looked back at the boulder, and from this angle, I could see that there was a rattlesnake coiled up about 2 feet away from where I was sitting. I totally panicked, freaked out. I thought about what could have happened had it attacked me. How was I going to get my backpack? About sleeping a few campsites away with no tent. About it slithering into my sleeping bag looking for warmth. And I just completely panicked, and I didn't get any sleep that night. But what I did get was the most profound insight of my entire life. And that is, your body's stress response cannot be activated without your mind's help. Your mind has to first filter and interpret what's out there before anything happens in here. And so I was completely calm and relaxed while sitting on a boulder with a rattlesnake in clear and immediate danger. And then I was in full-blown fight or flight mode once I was out of harm's way and completely safe. And now you might argue and say, well, anybody would be afraid sitting beside a boulder, but beside a rattlesnake. But even that's not true, because when the guide arrived, he calmly took my backpack off the boulder. He jumped right up on the boulder. He got down there and he said, wow, she's a beauty. And he said, she's probably coiled up there like that, digesting a big meal. And I thought, yeah, that big meal could have been me. And so you can really see how the difference in our filter changed our reactions. So my filter came from my mom, who was petrified of little garter snakes. And for those of you who are old enough, I watched Raiders of the Lost Ark when I was little. So all snakes are dangerous at all times, no matter the circumstances. And my guide's filter is that rattlesnakes are harmless unless provoked. Now, I'm not here trying to convince you of whether or not you should be afraid of rattlesnakes, or even whether you should be stressed when storms hit your life. And they will. My point here is that we all have filters through which we are interpreting the world. And from those filters, that will determine how we react and how much stress we have. And these filters are often faulty. They were put there 10, 20, 30, 40, God knows how many years ago, and have probably never been changed. And so when I go back and I think about my burnout, I realize that the underlying cause of my burnout wasn't caregiving. It wasn't grief, my kids, work, money, fill in the blank. The underlying cause of my burnout was another faulty filter that I got when I was just a little girl. And that was, I'm bad, unlovable, and unworthy. And from this filter, I wanted to please my family. I wanted to make them proud. I wanted to be the hero. I wanted to save the day. And I didn't want to disappoint them. So I took on more than I was capable of. I said yes when I should have been saying no. I didn't ask for any help. And I wasn't just doing this in my caregiving role. I was doing this everywhere because I wanted to prove myself. I wanted to prove myself to you. I even worried about people liking me who I didn't even like. And since my burnout, I've been through many, many storms. Divorce, more deaths, kids leaving home, selling houses, changing jobs, financial hardships. But what I can tell you is that I've had a whole lot less stress since I changed my filters. So if I've convinced you or influenced in any way tonight, I hope you'll go home and look and see if you've got any faulty filters that need to be changed. Thank you.